Have you ever wondered why so many Americans struggle to break free from bad habits, no matter how many times they try? Maybe you've seen it in your own life or in the lives of people around you, friends who swear off junk food only to be caught in the drive-thru a week later, family members who promise to quit drinking but end up back at the bar after a stressful day, or maybe it's the endless cycle of New Year's resolutions. Gyms packed in January, empty by March. It's a story as old as the American dream itself. This idea that with enough willpower, anyone can reinvent themselves overnight. But if that's true, why do so many of us keep falling back into the same old patterns? The truth is, America has always been obsessed with transformation. From the earliest settlers who crossed oceans in search of a new life, to the self-made millionaires who built empires from nothing, we're taught that change should be big, bold, and immediate. We love stories of overnight success, dramatic weight loss, and instant turnarounds. But behind the scenes, most real change doesn't happen in a flash. It happens slowly, almost invisibly, through choices so small they barely seem to matter, until they do. So, what if everything you've been told about breaking bad habits is wrong? What if the secret isn't about going harder, faster, or being more disciplined? What if the real answer is something so simple, so subtle, that most people overlook it entirely? Today, I'm going to reveal a method that challenges everything you think you know about change. A system inspired by philosophies that have quietly transformed lives for centuries, but rarely get the spotlight in our fast-paced, results-driven culture. Before we dive in, ask yourself, are you ready to question the all-or-nothing mindset that's been holding you back? Because what you're about to discover might just change the way you approach every challenge in your life, from losing weight to overcoming addiction, to finally breaking free from the habits that have kept you stuck for years. And it all starts with one, almost laughably small, step. Think about how many times you, or someone you know, have tried to make a big change, only to end up right back where you started. It's almost a rite of passage in America. We're a nation built on second chances and fresh starts. But for most people, the cycle of failure feels endless. Maybe you remember the first time you tried to quit smoking, tossing the pack in the trash and vowing, never again. Or maybe it was the time you signed up for a gym membership, determined to finally get in shape, only to watch your motivation fade as the weeks went by. For millions of Americans, these stories aren't just personal, they're cultural. We see them play out every January when the country collectively decides to turn over a new leaf, only to watch those resolutions crumble by spring. It's not just about willpower either. The United States has a long history of quick-fix solutions and miracle cures. From the snake oil salesman of the Wild West promising instant relief from every ailment to the modern-day diet industry selling lose 20 pounds in 20 days plans, we're constantly bombarded with the idea that change should be fast and dramatic. But the reality is, most people who try these methods end up feeling worse than before. The weight comes back. The bad habits return. And with every failed attempt, the belief that I just can't do it gets a little stronger. This cycle isn't just frustrating, it's exhausting. It chips away at your confidence, making you question whether lasting change is even possible. You start to believe that maybe you're just not cut out for success, that maybe you're destined to struggle forever. And in a country that celebrates self-reliance and personal achievement, admitting defeat can feel like the ultimate failure. But here's the thing, you're not alone. According to research, nearly 80% of people who set out to change a major habit relapse within the first month. It's not because they're weak, lazy, or lack discipline. It's because the system they're using is broken. The American approach to self-improvement often demands everything, all at once. We're told to overhaul our diets, start intense workout routines, cut out every vice, and become a new person overnight. But when life gets stressful, when work piles up, when family needs you, When the world feels overwhelming, those big changes become impossible to maintain. And so, the cycle repeats. Try, fail, feel worse, try again. It's a pattern that's left millions of people stuck, frustrated, and searching for answers. But what if the problem isn't you? What if the real issue is the way we've been taught to approach change? In a country that prides itself on bold moves and big dreams, maybe the secret to breaking the cycle is to do the exact opposite. Maybe the answer isn't to go bigger, but to start smaller, so small, in fact, that failure isn't even an option. And that's where the real story begins. For many Americans, the turning point doesn't come with a dramatic announcement or a sudden burst of motivation. It comes quietly, often in a moment of private defeat. Maybe it's the night you find yourself alone in the kitchen, finishing off a pint of ice cream after a stressful day, wondering how you ended up here again. Or maybe it's the morning you step on the scale, see a number you promised yourself you'd never reach, and feel a wave of shame and frustration. These moments aren't unique. They're woven into the fabric of American life, where the pressure to succeed is matched only by the fear of falling short. Throughout history, Americans have been taught to pick themselves up after every setback, from the pioneers who rebuilt after losing everything on the frontier, to the families who survived the Great Depression by scraping together whatever they could. Resilience is part of our national identity. But in the modern world, where challenges are less about survival and more about self-mastery, that same spirit can sometimes turn against us. We tell ourselves to just try harder, to never give up, even when the methods we're using are setting us up to fail. Take Christopher's story, for example, a story that could belong to anyone, anywhere in the country. He was a hard-working father, juggling a demanding job, family responsibilities, and the daily grind that so many Americans know all too well. Like millions before him, he tried to change his life the way he thought he was supposed to. Strict diets, intense exercise, and sheer willpower. Each time, he started strong, fueled by hope and determination. But as the days passed and the pressures of work, family, and exhaustion piled up, his resolve faded. The gym visits stopped. The healthy meals gave way to takeout. The old habits crept back in, stronger than ever. For Christopher, the real turning point wasn't a moment of triumph. It was a moment of vulnerability. It happened on an ordinary Saturday in a backyard that could have been anywhere in suburban America. He found himself unable to get up from a crouch, his son watching in silence, his pride shattered. It was a scene that echoed the struggles of countless parents across the country who want nothing more than to be present for their children, but feel trapped by their own limitations. That night, sitting on the edge of his bed, Christopher realized that something had to change, not just for himself, but for his family. This is the moment that so many Americans reach sooner or later. It's the realization that the old ways aren't working, that the promises made in January or on birthdays or after doctor's visits have all faded away. It's the quiet admission that you can't do it alone, that maybe you need a new approach, one that doesn't demand perfection or superhuman effort, but instead meets you where you are. For Christopher, that meant reaching out to a friend who had succeeded where he had failed, and being open to advice that sounded almost too simple to believe. In the United States, asking for help can feel like admitting defeat. We're raised on stories of self-made men and women, of pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. But the truth is, every great American success story is built on moments of humility, on recognizing when it's time to try something different. Christopher's turning point wasn't about finding the perfect diet or the toughest workout. It was about accepting that real change starts with a single, honest step. And as he would soon discover, that step didn't have to be big. It just had to be real. When Christopher finally decided to seek help, he expected the same advice he'd heard 1,000 times before. In America, the standard prescription for change is almost always the same. Work harder, push through, and never settle for less. Our culture is built on the idea that anything worth having requires sacrifice and struggle. From the earliest days of the nation, when settlers braved the unknown in search of a better life, to the modern era of self-help gurus and fitness influencers, the message has been clear. If you want to change, you have to go big or go home. But what Christopher encountered was something entirely different. Instead of a lecture about discipline or a strict new regimen, he was given a task so small, so seemingly insignificant, that it almost felt like a joke. The advice? Drink a single glass of water every morning. That's it. No meal plans, no calorie counting, no grueling workouts, just water. At first, Christopher was skeptical. How could something so simple make any difference? In a country where billion-dollar industries are built on complex solutions, detox teas, high-tech fitness trackers, and endless supplements, the idea that a glass of water could be the first step toward transformation seemed almost laughable. But that's exactly why it worked, because for the first time, the barrier to change was so low that failure was nearly impossible. This approach flies in the face of the American obsession with instant results. We're used to seeing dramatic before and after photos, to hearing about people who lost 50 pounds in a month or quit smoking overnight. But what those stories rarely show is the aftermath, the relapses, the burnout, the quiet return to old habits when the initial burst of motivation fades. The truth is, most people can't sustain massive change all at once. Life in the United States is busy, stressful, and unpredictable. Between work, family, and the constant demands of modern living, it's no wonder that so many attempts at self-improvement end in disappointment. The genius of the glass of water method is that it sidesteps all of that. It doesn't require you to overhaul your life or summon superhuman willpower. It simply asks you to do one small thing every day, no matter what. And in a country where so many people feel overwhelmed by the sheer scale of their problems, that simplicity is revolutionary. Christopher's first few days were almost embarrassingly easy. He'd wake up, drink his water, and go about his day. There were no dramatic changes, no immediate results, but something subtle began to shift. For the first time in years, he was able to keep a promise to himself. And in a culture that often equates self-worth with achievement, that small victory was more powerful than any crash diet or boot camp. This unconventional solution draws on a wisdom that's often overlooked in the American rush for results. The idea that real, lasting change starts with the smallest possible step. It's a lesson that echoes through history, from the pioneers who built their futures one day at a time, to the civil rights leaders who knew that every march, every speech, every act of courage added up to something greater. In the end, it's not the grand gestures that change lives. It's the daily choices, repeated over time, that build a new reality. By embracing a method that felt almost too simple to matter, Christopher was tapping into a deeper truth about transformation. In a nation that celebrates the extraordinary, sometimes the most radical thing you can do is start with the ordinary. And as he would soon discover, that single glass of water was just the beginning. What Christopher didn't realize at first was that this simple act, drinking a glass of water each morning, was rooted in a philosophy that runs counter to much of what American culture teaches about self-improvement. In the United States, we're taught to idolize the overnight success. We celebrate the stories of people who make dramatic changes, who go from rags to riches, or from unhealthy to fit, seemingly in the blink of an eye. But beneath the surface, the real secret to lasting transformation is something far more subtle, and it's a lesson that's been quietly practiced in other cultures for centuries. The philosophy behind Christopher's new approach is called Kaizen, a Japanese concept that means continuous improvement. Instead of demanding perfection or instant results, Kaizen is about making tiny, incremental changes day after day. It's the idea that if you improve by just 1% each day, those small gains will compound over time, leading to extraordinary results. In fact, if you improve by 1% every day for a year, you're not just 365% better, you're nearly 38 times better, thanks to the power of compounding. This is a concept that American businesses have quietly adopted for decades, especially in manufacturing and tech, but it's rarely applied to personal change. But Kaizen is just the beginning. As Christopher continued his journey, he was introduced to other philosophies that challenged the American all-or-nothing mindset. One of these is Hara-Hachi-Bu, an Okinawan principle that means eating until you're 80% full. In a country where supersized portions and all-you-can-eat buffets are the norm, the idea of stopping before you're completely full feels almost radical. Yet studies show that this simple practice is one of the reasons why Okinawa has some of the longest living people in the world. It's not about deprivation, it's about moderation and learning to listen to your body. Then there's wabi-sabi, the art of embracing imperfection. In the United States, we're bombarded with images of flawless bodies, perfect homes, and curated lives on social media. The pressure to be perfect can be overwhelming, and it's one of the main reasons people give up when they slip or stumble. Wabi-sabi teaches that imperfection is not only inevitable, but beautiful. It's the cracks in the pottery, the faded paint on an old barn, the laugh lines on a loved one's face. When Christopher learned to accept his own setbacks, not as failures, but as part of the process, he found the freedom to keep going, even when things weren't perfect. And finally, there's Gambaru, the spirit of perseverance. This is the quiet strength that has carried Americans through wars, depressions, and personal hardships for generations. It's the determination to keep moving forward, even when progress is slow or invisible. Gambaru isn't about never falling. It's about always getting back up. For Christopher, this meant returning to his small habits, day after day, no matter how many times he stumbled. Together, these philosophies form a system that's both ancient and revolutionary. They stand in stark contrast to the quick-fix mentality that dominates American self-help culture. Instead of promising instant results, they offer something much more valuable, a path to real, sustainable change. By focusing on small, consistent actions like drinking a glass of water, eating a little less, or taking a short walk, Christopher was able to build momentum without overwhelming himself. And as these habits stacked up, they began to transform not just his body, but his entire identity. In a country that's always looking for the next big thing, it's easy to overlook the power of small beginnings. But, as history has shown, the most enduring changes often start with the simplest steps. The American Revolution began with a handful of colonists meeting in secret. The Civil Rights Movement started with quiet acts of resistance. And for Christopher, the journey to a new life began with a single glass of water. The philosophies he discovered didn't just help him lose weight, they gave him a new way to live, one small choice at a time. As Christopher continued to follow this new path, something remarkable began to happen, something that went far beyond the numbers on the scale or the size of his clothes. The transformation he experienced was not just physical, but deeply personal, and it rippled outward to touch every part of his life. In America, we often measure success by visible milestones, pounds lost, dollars earned, promotions achieved. But the real story of change is often told in the quiet moments, the small victories, and the subtle shifts in how we see ourselves and the world around us. At first, Christopher's changes were almost invisible to those around him. He drank his glass of water each morning, put a little less food on his plate, and took short walks to the mailbox. These actions didn't make headlines or draw applause, but they were building something far more important than instant results. They were building trust in himself. For the first time in years, he was keeping promises, not to a boss or a family member, but to himself. In a country where self-reliance is a core value, this kind of personal integrity is the foundation of real transformation. As the weeks turned into months, the effects of these small habits began to compound. Christopher found that he had more energy at work, more patience with his children, and a growing sense of confidence that he hadn't felt in years. His family started to notice the difference too. His daughter, who once stopped asking him to play, now looked forward to their morning walks. His wife, who had watched him struggle for so long, saw a new lightness in his step and a spark in his eyes. These changes didn't happen overnight, but they were steady and real, just like the progress that built America itself, one brick, 1 mile, one day at a time. The transformation wasn't always smooth. There were setbacks, holidays filled with temptation, stressful days at work, moments when old habits tried to creep back in. But each time Christopher stumbled, he remembered the lessons of wabi-sabi and gambaru. Imperfection is part of the journey, and perseverance is what keeps you moving forward. Instead of giving up after a bad day, he simply returned to his small habits the next morning. This resilience echoes the American spirit that has carried generations through wars, economic downturns, and personal hardships. It's not about never falling, it's about always getting back up. As Christopher's identity shifted, so did his relationships. He became more present with his family, more engaged at work, and more open to new experiences. The ripple effect of his transformation began to spread. His children started to mimic his healthy habits. His coworkers asked about his secret, and his friends found inspiration in his steady progress. In American history, we see this same pattern. One person's courage or innovation sparking change in a community, a city, or even a nation. The civil rights movement, the women's suffrage movement, the rise of Silicon Valley, all began with individuals who dared to do things differently, and whose actions inspired others to follow. But perhaps the most profound change was internal. Christopher no longer saw himself as someone who was doomed to fail, but as someone who could be trusted to follow through. He stopped chasing quick fixes and started embracing the slow, steady work of building a new life. This shift in identity is at the heart of every lasting transformation, whether it's personal or national. It's the difference between a country that dreams of freedom and one that actually lives it, between a person who wishes for change and one who becomes it. By the time Christopher looked back on his journey, he realized that the real victory wasn't just in the weight he'd lost or the habits he'd changed. It was in the person he had become, a person who could be counted on, who could weather setbacks, and who could inspire others to believe that change is possible. In a nation built on the promise of renewal and reinvention, Christopher's story is a reminder that the most powerful transformations often start with the smallest steps, and that the true measure of success is not how quickly you reach your goal, but how deeply you change along the way. Behind every personal transformation, there's a science, a set of principles that explain why some changes stick while others fade away. In the United States, the pursuit of self-improvement has always been intertwined with innovation and research. From the early days of Benjamin Franklin's experiments with daily habits to the modern era of behavioral psychology, Americans have long sought to understand what truly drives lasting change. One of the most important discoveries in recent decades is that the human brain is hardwired to resist sudden, drastic shifts. Neuroscientists at leading American universities, like Stanford and Harvard, have shown that our brains interpret big, abrupt changes as threats. This triggers a stress response, making it much harder to stick with new routines. That's why so many people who attempt radical diets or extreme fitness programs end up quitting. They're fighting against their own biology. Instead, research suggests that the most effective way to create lasting change is through what scientists call behavioral nudges. Tiny, manageable adjustments that fly under the radar of our brain's resistance. This is the same principle behind Kaizen, the Japanese philosophy of continuous improvement. But it's also deeply rooted in American history. Think about the way the United States itself was built, not through one grand gesture, but through a series of small, persistent actions. The Transcontinental Railroad, for example, wasn't laid in a day. It was built mile by mile, spike by spike, by workers who showed up day after day, even when progress seemed invisible. Modern studies back this up. Researchers at the University of California have found that when people focus on making one small change at a time, like drinking a glass of water each morning or taking a short walk, the new behavior is far more likely to become automatic. Over time, these small wins build confidence and create a positive feedback loop. Each success, no matter how minor, rewires the brain to expect more success. This is why Christopher's journey, which started with something as simple as a glass of water, was so effective. He wasn't just changing his habits, he was changing his brain. Another key insight from American behavioral science is the concept of identity-based change. According to research from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, people are more likely to stick with new habits when those habits become part of their identity. Instead of saying, "I'm trying to lose weight," the shift is to, "I'm the kind of person who takes care of my health." This subtle change in self-perception is powerful. It's the difference between a temporary effort and a permanent transformation. In American culture, this echoes the stories of immigrants who arrived with nothing and slowly built new lives, not by trying to fit in overnight, but by adopting new customs and routines, one day at a time, until they became part of who they were. The science also explains why setbacks are inevitable and why they don't have to be the end of the story. Studies from the American Psychological Association show that people who expect perfection are more likely to give up when they slip. But those who accept that mistakes are part of the process are much more likely to get back on track. This is the essence of wabi-sabi and gambaru, embracing imperfection and persevering through challenges. It's a lesson that resonates with the American experience, from the resilience shown during the Great Depression to the determination of civil rights activists who faced setback after setback, yet never stopped moving forward. Finally, the science of change reveals that transformation is contagious. When one person in a family or community adopts a new habit, others are more likely to follow. This ripple effect has shaped American history, from the spread of abolitionist ideals in the 19th century to the rise of health and wellness movements in the 21st. Christopher's story is a modern example of this phenomenon. As he changed, his family changed. His coworkers noticed. His friends grew curious. The impact of one small step multiplied, creating a wave of positive change that reached far beyond himself. In the end, the science of change confirms what history and experience have always shown. Lasting transformation isn't about willpower or dramatic gestures. It's about understanding how our minds work, respecting the process, and building a new identity one small step at a time. In a country that's always looking for the next big breakthrough, sometimes the most revolutionary discovery is that slow, steady progress is the surest path to real, lasting change. As Christopher's journey unfolded, the true impact of his transformation became clear, not just in his own life, but in the lives of everyone around him. In America, we often talk about legacy in terms of wealth, achievements, or the buildings and businesses we leave behind. But the most powerful legacies are often invisible, woven into the habits, values, and beliefs we pass on to others. Christopher's story is a modern reflection of this timeless truth, echoing the way American families, communities, and even the nation itself have been shaped by the quiet persistence of everyday people. Think about the stories that have defined American history. The pioneers who headed west didn't just carve out new lives for themselves, they set examples of courage and resilience that inspired generations. The civil rights leaders of the 1960s didn't just fight for their own freedom, Their actions sparked a movement that changed the country's moral compass. In the same way, Christopher's commitment to small daily changes became a living lesson for his children, his friends, and his coworkers. His daughter, once resigned to a father who sat on the sidelines, now saw a man who showed up every day, not just for her, but for himself. His son, watching his father's steady progress, learned that real strength isn't about never falling, but about always getting back up. This is the kind of legacy that can't be measured in pounds lost or miles walked. It's the legacy of identity, the quiet, persistent message that change is possible, that promises can be kept, and that even the smallest actions matter. In American culture, we see this in the way traditions are handed down, in the stories told around dinner tables, and in the values that shape our communities. The idea that if you work at something, even a little bit every day, you can change your life is as American as the 4th of July. But Christopher's story also comes with a challenge, a call to action that echoes the spirit of American innovation and self-reliance. He didn't keep his transformation to himself. Instead, he invited others to join him, not by demanding they follow a strict plan, but by asking a simple question: what's the smallest change you can make today? This question is deceptively powerful. It cuts through the noise of quick fixes and miracle cures, and it puts the responsibility and the possibility back in your hands. Throughout American history, progress has always started with a single step. The first vote cast by a woman, the first African-American student to walk into an all-white school, the first entrepreneur to open a business in a new town. Each of these moments began with a decision to do something small, something that might have seemed insignificant at the time. But over days, months, and years, those small actions added up to something extraordinary. Christopher's challenge to his friends, family, and now to you is to find that one small thing you can do today. Maybe it's drinking a glass of water in the morning. Maybe it's taking a 5-minute walk after dinner, or writing down one thing you're grateful for before bed. The point isn't to change everything at once. The point is to start and to keep going, even when it feels like nothing is happening. Because, as American history has shown time and again, the most profound changes often begin with the simplest acts. So as you reflect on Christopher's journey, ask yourself, what legacy do you want to leave? What small action can you take today that your future self, and maybe even your children or your community, will thank you for? In a country built on the dreams and determination of ordinary people, your story matters. Your habits matter. And your willingness to take that first, small step could be the spark that lights the way for others. In the end, the real legacy isn't just about what you achieve, but about who you become, and who you inspire others to become along the way. That's the American story. That's the power of one small change. And that's the challenge waiting for you right now. As we reach the end of Christopher's story, it's worth pausing to reflect on what his journey truly represents, not just for him, but for anyone who's ever struggled to change. In America, we're surrounded by stories of transformation. From the founding fathers who dared to imagine a new nation to the millions of immigrants who arrived on these shores with nothing but hope, the idea of reinvention is woven into our national DNA. But if you look closely, you'll see that the most enduring transformations, whether personal or historical, rarely happen overnight. They're built, brick by brick, habit by habit, over months and years. Christopher's experience is a living example of this. He didn't become a new person in a week or even a month. His transformation was the result of hundreds of small choices, repeated day after day, until they became part of who he was. This is the same process that built America itself. The first colonies didn't become a nation in a single declaration. They grew through years of persistence, compromise, and steady progress. The civil rights movement didn't change hearts and laws in a single march, but through countless acts of courage, both big and small, that added up to a revolution. The 5 philosophies that guided Christopher, Ikigai, Kaizen, Harahachibu, Wabi-sabi, and Gambaru, are not just abstract ideas. They're practical tools for anyone who wants to build a better life, one step at a time. Ikigai gives you purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. Kaizen reminds you that progress is made in tiny increments, not giant leaps. Harahachibu teaches moderation, a lesson that's especially powerful in a culture of excess. Wabi-sabi offers compassion for your imperfections, and Gambaru gives you the grit to keep going, even when things get tough. If you look back at American history, you'll see these same principles at work. The pioneers who moved west didn't know what challenges they'd face, but they kept moving forward, 1 mile at a time. The inventors and entrepreneurs who built the nation's industries didn't succeed on their first try. They failed, learned, and tried again. The activists who fought for justice didn't let setbacks stop them. They found strength in their purpose and kept marching, even when the road was long. So, what does this mean for you? It means that you don't need to wait for the perfect moment or for a surge of motivation to start changing your life. You don't need to overhaul everything at once. You just need to pick one small thing, something so simple you can't fail, and do it every day. Over time, those small actions will add up, and you'll look back to see that you've built something extraordinary. Ask yourself, where do you want to be in 5 years? In 10? The time will pass, whether you change or not. The question is, will you use that time to build the life you want, or will you stay stuck in the same old patterns? Christopher's story shows that it's never too late to start, and that the smallest step can lead to the biggest transformation. In the spirit of American tradition, I challenge you to take that first step today. Write down the smallest change you're willing to make. Share it in the comments, or tell a friend. Make it public and make it real. Because when you commit to even the tiniest action, you're not just changing a habit, you're changing your identity. And when you change, you give permission for others to change too. Remember, the legacy of this country and of every person who's ever made a difference was built on small, consistent actions. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to begin. And when you stumble, as everyone does, get back up and keep going. That's the real secret to transformation. That's the American way. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If Christopher's story resonated with you, if you see yourself in his struggles and his triumphs, know that you're not alone. The path to change is open to everyone, no matter where you start. So take that first step, and let's build something incredible, one day, one habit, one choice at a time.